Hello, someone just
Hi.
joined the call with a telephone number ending on 191.
Yes, that's Jackie Ball.
Jackie, what's your last name?
Ball, Ball.
Jackie, let me ask you a question, Jackie. How did you join the call? Did you join from the link through an email link?
No, I'm using the landline.
Okay. Okay, give me 1 second, Jackie. We'll be with you shortly.
Thank you.
Hey, Miss Gill.
Okay, so it asked me, because I have an account with the new school, so it asked me to sign in.
Oh, Charles is on now.
Oh, Charles is in, okay, all right.
Manually inputting the meeting ID and password.
You had to do it again?
No, I had to manually input that.
Yeah, you have to manually input the password. Mm-hmm.
Okay, let me call our transcriber. Hold on. All right. I'm gonna call you back, Juanita. Okay.
That's getting worse in terms of privatization and private developers building on, what was formerly NYCHA development sites. Anybody have any comments on, because we were going to do that under new business, but maybe we can just take advantage. And I see that our Senator Benjamin is joining us, and then we'll go right to him. Any comments, or maybe we can, Senator Benjamin, we can segue to you. We were just talking while we were waiting for you to come on about the circumstances in NYCHA, where the recent report, the article today or yesterday, talks about the disproportionate impact, the number of persons who have died and gotten sick in our NYCHA developments. While that's not directly what you're going to be speaking on this evening, any comment on that, or from any of the other persons on the call?
Absolutely. So I have been talking very actively with the governor's office about expanding the amount of testing that is occurring at NYCHA. Right now, there is some testing happening in Washington houses. On the east side, we need that expanded dramatically. I have the most NYCHA of any senator in the state. And so this is a very important topic. So that conversation is in the works. Also, we've got to be talking more about how we're going to be implementing the mayor's plan of having those who are asymptomatic being in hotels. As many of us know, in a lot of our NYCHA developments, you have 6, 7, 8 people in a 2-bedroom apartment. Social distancing is very difficult when you have a small footprint and more people. And so that is something that working with the mayor's office, I don't know how much you deal with Stacy Lynch in the mayor's office, but she's been doing a really good job of helping to make sure that Harlem has the right access in the mayor's office to work that issue. So I am actively involved in that conversation, trying to do 2 things. One, increase the amount of spacing, particularly those who are COVID impacted in NYCHA, but then also making sure that folks who are asymptomatic get into hotels.
So thank you. Go ahead, Stanley.
Right. Hi, Brian. How you doing?
Hello, Stanley. Good to see you. Looking good, Stanley.
Thank you. Is there anything that your office, or is there a collaboration with the other elected officials about the how many people in our community are getting are catching it in comparison to the other communities? I mean, it's proportionate, it's a real disproportionate number in our communities. And just like, what's being done? And I don't,
trying to get that information has been difficult. I got some recent information saying that we are in 730 something folks in central Harlem. I don't know how to value whether that's right or wrong. We're not getting official data from the state or the city. Particularly the city, we have been pushing on the mayor to provide more targeted data. We do have general data about Blacks, Latinos, areas. We are not as we're not impacted as harshly as the Bronx is being impacted and parts of Queens.
Yeah.
So Manhattan in general is doing better. Harlem and East Harlem in particular are doing worse than Manhattan in generally, but better than other minority Black and Latinos and Black and brown folks in other parts of the city. So we're trying to get that data. It's not easy. And pushing on the mayor's office to do that. I wish I had a better answer, Stanley.
But to take it a step further, why do you think it is?
Why is it hard to get the data?
No, why do you think that the proliferation is more in our Black and Latino community than the other part of the city?
I think for
This
me,
not putting you on the spot. I'm not putting you on the spot. You know,
No. I think a couple issues. One, I think is Black and brown folks tend to be essential workers at a way higher clip than anyone else, so we're out more.
Yeah.
Two, particularly if you look at NYCHA, where there's a lot of concern about the spread, public housing, housing where it's hard to socially distance, right? There are a number of folks who were asymptomatic and were sent back home, found out they had COVID-19 and were sent home because their symptoms weren't serious enough to require a hospital bed. Now, if you come back to a home that's 2,000 square feet, is very different than if you come back to a home that's 500 square feet, and depending on how the numbers are. So those are some of the issues that we're dealing with when you talk about urban density, which is what we have. We're very close. I have one of the most dense state senate districts in the state. There are some members of state where it takes you 3 hours to traverse their whole district, whereas you can do this in like 10 to 15 minutes, right? So so that's part of some of the issues on that.
Well, Stanley, I just want to say that we can share some information. The Greater Harlem Chamber of Commerce has a very, very active health committee who's been dealing with our health committee. And when you talk about Dr. John Palmer and Leon Merrick and a number of other physicians and Enrique Riggs, they meet weekly. So maybe we can tie you into some of those discussions, because they've been talking about the actual reasons why there's been a disproportionate impact on people of color, for the COVID-19. And they're working diligently on that with Ebony Carrington and all of the other, medical professionals. So those calls are happening weekly. So we'll plug you into that.
And by the way, there's a myth out there that somehow Black and brown people, particularly Blacks, are socially distancing less than other people. It's not true. Whites are not socially distancing either. I think there is, but there's definitely a public education campaign across the board. But when you combine the lack of social distancing, the lack of masks, and very dense areas, that's a match that gets really serious.
We're also taking heed. I mean, when and if we can, do you feel that we're doing it as much as we should, or we could be more?
What could be more? What?
More social distancing, more watching ourselves.
I think we should, but look, I don't believe in. I'm not I've been very active against the NYPD enforcing social distancing and putting people in jail and doing all that. I think there's a lot of cure violence and faith-based groups who should be getting funded. Right now, the city, at the bare minimum, has a $10 million campaign on communication outreach strategies, and I keep trying to find out where the money's going. I don't know of any community groups on the ground that have been receiving any of this money, and it's just disturbing. I mean, anyway, that's another. I don't want to get off track, but go ahead.
Senator Benjamin, I know your time is limited. I wanted to do a couple of things. Janelle Washington put a good point into the group chat, and please, board members, put your names into that. That's our attendance sheet for this evening. But the suggestion was that, we introduce some of our new board members, I see that, we have, who have joined us. I know Marcus Wilson, is a new member, who has joined. I also see that Terry Wisdom, has joined us. Omar Arias, has joined us. Make sure you put your name into the group chat. Are there any other new board members that I did not now just mention? So we have a few people, Senator Benjamin, that you asked me to invite to this meeting. I know we have Donald Notice. Donald, thank you so much for joining this Zoom call. We have Curtis Archer and Kenny Morrison, and I'm sure that there are others, you know, who may have come on. So I just really wanted to be attentive to your time. And I know you had a particular message relating to housing, that, you know, the work that is happening up in the Senate and the Assembly. And so why don't you just go ahead and share with us, please?
Sure. I wanted, first of all, thank you, Brother Powell, and everyone on the phone. I'm sorry, on the Zoom, for being here. I just wanted to, you know, as we've been, first of all, as a former chair of land use, I do feel that if there's any time that you or Stanley want me to be present for a conversation, I'm happy to do it as long as the schedule allows for it. But one of the things I just wanted to be clear on, because I know there's been a lot of conversation and there's a lot of things happening in the media, I just wanted to be very clear on sort of what I see as the things that are the case as it relates to rent, and sort of where I see some of this going, just to sort of put that out there. Number one, as we stand presently, there is a eviction moratorium, which means that no cases, no rental evictions can occur between now and June 20th. So between now and June 20th, if anyone is experiencing a landlord trying to evict them, it is not permitted by state executive order. The governor put in a new executive order that basically said from June 21st to August 20th, so for 2 months past the June 20th date, there can be no evictions for anything that is COVID-19 related. So issues that are not tied to COVID-19 will be able to commence. So then the obvious question becomes, what is the definition of COVID-19?
Yeah.
The courts have discretion in deciding that. So maybe you might want to talk to Judge Milton Tingling or some other folks who might be sort of aware of what the sort of mindset is. But I think it's very important that people are not confused about what exactly the period is. I know there have been a number of folks who have been pushing the cancel rent movement, and some people are thinking that that is law, or that somehow, because some people have said it, that's something that you can do. You do that at your own risk. Right now, the only thing that is not permitted is an eviction, but a landlord can still hold people accountable for back rent.
Yeah.
Now, what we have been working on in the state, I've been part of a working group, a housing work group that has been focusing on this, is trying to come up with some rules of the road for when we get to that point. And so and to get to the point where evictions are then permitted. And some of the things we've been looking at is trying to define what a COVID-19 hardship is. There's some various thoughts on that. You know, one's income, previous income, present income, how they've been impacted, you know, medical bills, et cetera. We've been trying to figure out how to do that. I think what we're going to end up doing, and you know, don't quote me, but I think what we're going to end up doing is probably tasking some agency to sort of help provide guidelines that could move over time depending upon what's going on. Secondly, you know, we are looking at how do you deal with extension of residential leases? How do you deal with the termination of residential leases? You know, there's some folks who are like, you know what, I would like to leave, and they're having a hard time getting out of their leases, though they're COVID-19 impacted. They might have lost some roommates, or they just lost their job. No, they don't see that coming back anytime soon. So, you know, we want to be mindful of that and try to have laws in place for that. You know, how do we deal with tax liens? You know, one of the things that many of us are concerned about is that this somehow can become a period where, you know, if you're an owner of an HDFC unit or what have you, you can get caught up in tax lien issues, and then all of a sudden someone else owns the property. We don't want that to happen, and so we want to make sure that any moratoriums include thoughts around tax foreclosures, sale of tax liens, and all that to protect home ownership, which doesn't get as much attention as rental units do, but is a very important part of the Harlem story. And we want to make sure that is in the conversation as well. And then lastly, we believe very strongly that we need to get federal assistance. You know, the Senate Republicans have been playing games about, oh, we don't want to support the states and we don't want to bail them out and all these other things. It's important to note that New York State provides every year $30+ billion more than New York State gets back. So if anything, New York State has been historically bailing out the rest of the country, and given the crisis that has impacted New York City particularly so harshly, I don't think it's unreasonable to ask for the federal government to be there to assist with any with emergency rental assistance for those who have been impacted by this crisis. And so I just wanted to kind of lay that out there. I'm happy to answer any questions or receive any thoughts or inputs that we should consider. We are going to go back to session next week. The State Senate, we will be in session next week, and it's our intention to do some meaningful things around rent in particular that will help provide some clarity for residents in New York State. And so that's what I just wanted to kind of bring to you and answer any questions anyone might have.
So Senator Benjamin, we have some few questions that have been put on, and there's even a question for you regarding NYCHA when you were making your presentation. But in our conversations, you had talked about, you know, the issues that I know that we had Donald Notice and Kenny Morrison and even Curtis Archer come on the call, and that is what's happening with, you know, these affordable multifamily, you know, projects, often as mine is, run by not-for-profits,
right?
You know, that are struggling around. Can you offer anything? And then I'd like to hear from either Donald and Kenny as to what you guys have been experiencing, especially you, Donald, from the West Harlem Group Assistance Organization, in terms of the struggles. So when tenants aren't paying rent, there is that domino effect as to what happens with, you know, landlords who are trying to maintain these affordable housing projects on razor-thin budgets and really wholly dependent on, you know, that rental income for their operating expenses and to pay their bills that haven't stopped coming. So any comments on that?
No, absolutely. And, you know, there are, not all landlords are the same. And I think we run the risk of having a lot of unintended consequences in our community if we treat all landlords the same. We've got a number of smaller landlords, nonprofit landlords who are doing the right things. And if we create a situation that's untenable for them, then they will end up being taken over by vulture landlords and the like. And so that's an important part of the conversation, which is one of the big reasons why we believe that it was important to define COVID-19 hardship, make sure that the people who are getting help are those who have been directly impacted, and you know, thinking about issues like, you know, making sure that we look at property taxes, and if there are developments that have a lot of impacted tenants, we should try to smooth out some of their expenses, at least as it relates to expenses they have to give to the city in terms of property taxes, utilities, and others, so that they can sort of maintain and manage. I mean, I know in our communities, I know Donald Notice, I see him on the phone, hired from our community, and that's all done based upon the rental payments that they get coming in. So we've got to make sure that there's balance here and that we protect the renter and the responsible landlord at the same time, and that's what we're trying to do.
So can we talk to Donald Notice? Can we hear from you? And Kenny Morrison, can we hear from you regarding what the senator just reported on? Tell us a little bit about what's happening with your portfolio.
Hi, good evening, everybody.
Good
Good
evening.
to see everybody, especially you, Stanley. Good to see you, brother. And Senator, thanks for coming on and everything that you do for the community. So for West Harlem, we've experienced some COVID-19 issues. We put out a survey about a month ago because one of our projects, Randolph Houses, was experiencing a lot of COVID-19 related issue as it relates to the virus and people passing away. And we wanted to look to see if it was, our agency-wide portfolio. So we put out a survey and we got back quite few of the surveys. And one of the things we touched base on was COVID-19 issues. Are they sick? Have they been infected? Has anybody passed away? And we talked about the unemployment issue and have they lost their jobs? Are they, looking for Section 8 and what other problems they're having with paying their rent? And we talked about the food insecurities in our community. So we got most of the surveys back. I want to report 76% of the tenants that responded said that they lost their jobs. So we have a high percentage of tenants that lost their jobs, but the tenants are continue on the residential side is continue to pay rent. So we're not getting a drop off. And one of the questions that we asked, if they would be able to continue to pay their rent or do they want a subsidy? And some of them must have had, savings or something like that. So we are experiencing a decent amount of collection on the residential side. I think our problem is on the commercial side, where over 95% of our commercial tenants were shut down, 100%.
Yeah.
We had 2 restaurants that was just doing takeout, but all the rest of the commercial portfolio was shut down, and we're getting almost zero collection on the commercial side. We've been working with those commercial tenants to apply for the Northern Manhattan grant that was available for Hamilton Heights, and we've been working with them to get PPP applications done. But that's where we are. I think for the most part, rent collection is decent. I think it's gonna probably have a problem in June, but April and May, the collection is pretty good. And there was, probably attributed to the stimulus package, the $1,200 that, that residents were getting, they was, paying their rent. We do have a lot of the food insecurities, and we've been working with families on that. We have a relationship with the Greater Chamber, and we get food over to them for their residents. And we've been servicing at our food pantry on Lenox Avenue. We was up to about 5,000 people a month before COVID happened. We're doing 7,000 people a week now since COVID. So, but we're getting a tremendous amount of contributions from all of our food, vendors and partners, and we're able to distribute out at the pantry, and we're doing a lot of pop-up pantries. We're doing one, we just did one today at Randolph Houses, and we're working with Inez Dickens, and we're gonna do one at Lincoln, and we're doing one at Drew Hamilton, and we're gonna do a lot more within the Harlem community because we're getting a lot of food from all of our different vendors. But that's the update on West Harlem Group Assistance.
Okay, so we have a couple of questions. I know a few, Chanel Washington has put questions in. Chanel, I see you have a few of them. Why don't we start with 1 or 2 of your questions before we turn to Kenny Morrison, and if we still have Curtis Archer on the line. So go ahead, Chanel.
Can you hear me? Okay, so one of my questions for Senator Benjamin is that there was a hearing that took place 2 days ago on the effects of COVID on minority communities. So is there a list of organizations that you brought to that hearing so that they can hear what we are experiencing here in Harlem?
I will get you the list. The Senate. I'll get you the entire list that we had. Yes, there were a number of groups that were on that list that I provide. So just so you understand the way how it works is we provide we provide options to the state and the assembly. and they sort of work with them to try to figure out who can join. But yes, I invited the NAACP, I invited a number of other groups, but I don't have the list in front of me.
Right, and the only reason why I'm asking is because you mentioned the NYCHA issue. And I heard them mention that they were, or a few electeds mentioned that cure violence will be one of the directions to go in terms of social distancing within NYCHA and, you know, certain communities. Is that the direction that they're going? And does that mean that there'll be monies allocated to those organizations under that umbrella to do that work?
So that's what I would like to have happen. What the mayor has said thus far is that the NYPD is not going to be engaging in any social distancing arrests after the threat to public safety. Now, they have increased the amount of ambassadors that they have. So they're using some of the school safety agents and some of the folks who are city workers who are not working right now to help with social distancing. My understanding is that they're working with cure violence groups and crisis management groups, sort of faith-based groups, they're working on coming up with a plan that they can agree on. I believe that those groups should be funded if that's going to happen. Yeah. I want that to happen, but my understanding is that they're working with the various cure violence groups on a memorandum of understanding.
Okay, because the only reason why I asked is I think that would be a great idea. Only we here in the CB10 district, we only have one site. So I don't know if that's a conversation to expand street corner resources or how that works. So that's why I asked, because I do believe they should use cure violence for social distancing.
So street corner resources is part of the coalition that is negotiating with the city on this issue. So Aisha hasn't called me to say that something is not moving forward in a way that is helpful. I agree with you entirely on this. I think that I did a letter a week and a half ago. We had like 45 legislators sign it, calling on the mayor and the police commissioner to take the NYPD out of social distancing and use the cure violence and faith-based groups in the community who are already doing a lot of that work and have trust in the community. So I agree entirely, and I'm hoping that the mayor does the right thing on this.
If there's some legislation or something that comes out, could you let us know so that we can do our part in saying we support or vote on that, please?
Absolutely.
Oh, great question, Chanel. So I wanted to, I know there's some time management things for some people. Kenny Morrison, going back to you, again, not only before even your development, experiences recently, you've also done a lot of property management. Can you give us a sense of what those strains are that Donald Notice spoke about, whether on the residential or commercial side?
Sure. First of all, good evening to everyone. So out of the about 1,000 units that we manage from, say, 120th Street up to 147th Street in Central Harlem, I'll give you some data. In March, we've collected about 95% of our rents, which is pretty much the norm. In April, that dropped down to 72.4%. And when we're looking at the May collections, we expect it to be about the same. We think we may get around to 75%. As far as our commercial tenants, out of the maybe 16 to 17 commercial tenants that we have, and we have very small commercial tenants, anywhere from 400 square feet up to 1,500 square feet, barbershop, beauty salon, folks who are from the community, only about 25% of them are paying rent. They were non-essential businesses for the most part, so they've really been struggling. I've talked to a few of them. They've applied for the PPP. Some have not received yet, some have. And, we're gonna work something out with them when they get back to business, when they open back up. So we're having individual conversations with them. Out of my portfolio, as of today, we've lost seven of our tenants to COVID-19. 3 were senior citizens. Yeah, so we've also done like Donald has done, but we were a little bit later in the process. We sent out a survey also, but our survey just really went out towards the end of last month. So we haven't received a lot of data back yet, but basically we asked the same questions. Are you unemployed? Are you someone in your house been affected with COVID? You had COVID, what can we do to help? I do have an associate of mine, a friend of mine who works for unemployment. So as tenants call me and tell me they haven't received the unemployment benefits, I'm connecting them with him. So those are some of the things we've done. We've also had some conversations with asset management at HPD to discuss Section 8 certificates and the FEPS program. They didn't really have any guidance on the FEPS program, but around Section 8, they said that there will be some certificates, but it's probably going to go to those developments that need it the most. So yeah, that's where we are. We're looking to see what things look like towards the end of May, and we'll take it from there.
Thank you, Kenny. So I know that we've been having Greater Harlem Chamber of Commerce and Greater Harlem Housing Development have been having conversations with with HPD on those Section 8 vouchers too, and asking them to liberalize, the eligibility for that. And that lends itself to, we also have been talking about with representatives from the federal government, had conversation with the former HPD Commissioner, Sean Donovan, who's now working back in the city. And he says that in CARES 2.1, that they're looking for emergency shelter solutions grants, for our residents. So I would hope, Senator Benjamin, that you can give us more guidance. And as Chanel says, we certainly need to be guided by all of you who are on this call, and give us some thoughts about what you think our Housing and Land Use Committee should be resolving. What positions should we be taking on things in order to complement the work that's being done by us on the ground, but also you and those legislative bodies. So Curtis Archer, are you still with us?
Yes, I am.
So I know you had some constraints in terms of your time on, what would you like to share with us? I mean, I certainly know we all have been reading, Lloyd Williams just did an article in AM New York about what's going to be happening on 125th Street in terms of our businesses. And of course that impacts, what's happening with housing development, as well. So what can you share from the state side, since you are a representative from Empire State Development Corporation?
And thank you. And thank you, everyone, for having me. As you know, Harlem CDC had actually underwent a pivot. So in terms of our direct involvement with housing development, we no longer do that. But with a couple of the guys on the call, from Kenny to Donald, one of the programs that we still participate in quite heavily, as you know, is the Weatherization Assistance Program. And we've actually done a couple of their buildings that they have in their portfolio, as well as last year, we also embarked on doing some weatherization assistance in NYCHA properties. And that, needless to say, has been a challenge because, and the senator will know, sometimes large bureaucracies can be a little bit complicated in being able to move stuff forward. So we, though, continue to be involved with that aspect of the residential portion of the Weatherization Assistance Program. On the other front, as you know, two properties that we have along 125th Street had ceased their redevelopment. One of them, of course, being the Victoria Theater, which we had anticipated that it would be completed by fourth quarter. That may not necessarily be the case because of COVID-19. In addition, there had been a stoppage of work at the National Urban League Center project. And that one, too, we're waiting for both of them to come back online so that the work can, finish with the Victoria and commence in earnest with the National Urban League project. And Senator, you sure are aware of the decommissioned prison on 110th. Okay, and so we certainly know that that's also one where the expected RFP had gone through some certain iterations and is not yet ready for release, but we're looking at that also to happen sometime in the fourth quarter this year, God willing. Right now, all of our small business resources in terms of working with the small business are now remote through WebEx and Zoom. And that's how we're getting out the information about the available resources that the small business community can tap into. Right now, the one that is actually in operation is the stuff coming through the SBA or the feds from the PPP, to also the disaster loan program. Those are right now are the only two things that are available through small business assistance. We're hoping, and I got to say this, that I have to stay behind what my boss, the governor, is going to come out with, but we're hoping that also Empire State will come on board in terms of actually putting out some of their own initiatives. But this is also very, very contingent upon the federal government coming through with some funds, because you may expect us to do stuff, but right now in any of these particular relief packages that have come through, there has not been any assistance for the states yet.
Right.
So thank you for that, Curtis. I know we have a question for you, Kenny, from Chanel Washington, and she asked, with incomes lost and possibly many won't return back to work, I'm interested in Mr. Morrison's opinions and concerns as tenants call for canceled rent.
Sure. So, of course, as a property manager and as a landlord, canceled rent is not, something that, we look forward to, but I understand what the residents are going through. And that's why we take this as a one-on-one or one-by-one, case-by-case situation. Some of our residents have reached out to us as soon as they lost their positions and say, hey, what can you do? Or what can I do? Or can you discount the rent? And we've told them that we will be willing to work with them on a one-on-one basis, but we need to know when things start to turn around, so we know what we're dealing with. We don't want to just arbitrarily say, no, you don't have to pay rent now. You can pay 50% of your rent. What we've been asking tenants to do is if they can pay a small amount, whether it's $200 a month, $150 a month, just to pay something, because unfortunately our bills do not stop. These affordable. Most of my properties are affordable housing. They run on very low margins. So, if, any loss of rent can be a detriment to the portfolio. So, but, we look forward to getting to a point where we can work with the tenants one-on-one. And like I said, if there are resources, I've been on a lot of Zoom calls with various officials, looking and hoping that there's going to be some support from the federal government residents. And as soon as that happens, I would love to be the connect to my residents. So that's the way I'm going to approach it.
So thank you, Kenny.
Hey, Charles.
Charles, go ahead, bro.
That's also our opinion as well, that, we are, I know the governor's fighting hard. We are all, we're pushing our delegation hard, congressional delegation hard to try to bring that money home in form of some kind of COVID-19 rental voucher to sort of help people who have been impacted, so that people can pay their rent and all the other bills that they have. And so that's a part of what we've been pushing for as well.
So I see we have the benefit, going to where you just went, Senator Benjamin, of Michelle Booker from Congressman Espaillat's office. Michelle, can you just chime in on what the congressman has been working on that's going to bring some much needed relief, as Chanel is asking, directly to tenants who are losing their jobs so as to prevent their eviction ultimately, and also for the relief that we need for landlords, who many of them are those small business owners as well, especially not-for-profits. Michelle, can you weigh in on that? Are you there, Michelle? I see you, but I don't hear you. So while we're waiting on Michelle, I also see we have the pleasure of Raphael from our councilman's office, who has joined us. Raphael, you've been listening intently. Anything that you want to add in terms of you guys on the ground as the councilman, in terms of what's happening or not happening with City Hall these days regarding these housing relief necessities?
I have to tell you that there is nothing that I have heard in that regard, but I believe that there's mostly something that is being planned in order to assist the tenants that might be in trouble in paying those rents. So I'm unable to give you exact information in that regard. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, because I have a problem with my computer. I'm unable to see myself here. So, no, I'm unable to do that. I think that listening to the news and a lot of things are coming from Washington, D.C. as to how the city, not necessarily in New York City, but throughout the United States, there will be help from Washington, D.C. So I presume that the Congressman Espaillat's office will probably have a more solid information in that regard.
Okay, thank you, Raphael. I mean, we're very interested in hearing from your office as to what, if anything, the city council is planning and proposing to deal with, you know, this rental crisis, especially as it relates to our multifamily affordable housing projects, which everyone agrees is in crisis because of what Donald and Kenny Morrison and others have mentioned. So I see that we also have another, you know, representative. I'm just looking to see if that person is still with us. Michelle, are you still there or not? So I'm just going to open it up now for any, I see for Senator Benjamin from Marcus Wilson. Will there be an open street site open in our community? And is there any plans on engaging community residents when, if the site's open, with schools, playgrounds, beaches, etc. being closed? I think this is especially needed around our NYCHA developments in the community at large.
First of all, I agree with that entirely. It's been something that I've been pushing the mayor on. I think I saw Delcinia Glover from the Public Advocate's office. Did I? If I did, I don't know if she has any information on that from his office. But that is something that is an important issue, and we need to make sure that it's going on. I will come back to you with a better answer than the one I just gave Charles. But it's something that I think is important. And we gotta make sure we do, particularly as it gets warmer. We have to be concerned about the fact that a lot of folks in NYCHA don't have air conditioning, adequate air conditioning, and this is you know, we're going to have a lot of activity on the street. So I want to make sure that we have adequate air conditioning, but then also adequate street exposure for people, which includes open streets, more open streets uptown.
Hello?
Hello?
Hello, y'all.
Hey, Charles, this is Shatik. I can speak to some of the open streets. I just got a list that I'm going to forward to the board probably tomorrow for some of the streets that have been opened up in our community. So I have 117th Street between Morningside Avenue and 5th Avenue. That's every day between 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. And the 28th Precinct will manage that street. Then we have 138th Street between Lenox Avenue and Adam Clayton Boulevard. That's also every day, 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. 32nd Precinct will manage that street closing. Then we have Charles Young Playground, 143rd Street between Malcolm X Boulevard and 5th Avenue. That's also every day, 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. 32nd Precinct will manage. Morningside Park area around Morningside Avenue between Manhattan Avenue and the 116th Street. That's also every day, 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. And the 28th Precinct will manage. And the last street is Edgecombe Avenue from 145th Street to 155th Street. And I will send this list out to the board members.
Thank you, Shatik.
No problem.
Shatik, that first one you mentioned, did you say between Morningside and 5th?
The first one is 117th Street between Morningside and 5th Avenue, yes.
That whole strip from Morningside to 5th?
Yes, 117th between Morningside and 5th Avenue, one block.
No, that's more than a block.
That's more
That's a
than
lot of blocks. This is Cordell speaking. That's a lot of blocks.
Oh, yeah, I do.
I don't know.
See that. Yeah, I'm sorry. More than one block. I'm sorry. Between Morningside and Fifth Avenue.
Yeah, that's a bunch of blocks.
That's a whole lot of
Yeah.
blocks.
A whole lot of blocks, yeah.
Mm.
What street is that?
117.
117.
Shatik, what about 114? Did they put that in there?
No mention of 114th. I got 117th, 138th, 143rd, and 116th. And then Edgecombe.
Yeah,
between
114
145th.
was in another. I'm sorry. I'm on the phone, so I don't know when you said. But the 114th was mentioned in one of the earlier updates from the mayor's office.
Yes, it was.
Hey, Charles Powell. We lose him.
If there's anyone
I
has,
got a-
hold on.
Hello?
Yeah, if anyone has any recommendations about streets or you have issues with any of the streets that were named, you can email it to me and then I'll send it in to our liaison at the mayor's office. I'll drop my email in the chat for everyone.
Hey,
Okay.
Can you send that to my office as well so we could amplify as well? So, send it to them, but also send it to my office if you don't mind.
Sure, no problem.
All right.
All right, so thank you, Shatik. Can we just go now to Delcenia Glover, because she does she's also a member of the Housing Committee, Land Use Committee, but she's also our representative of the Public Advocate's Office. And I think the Senator kind of segued to you in terms of what the Public Advocate is planning on with this housing crisis.
Actually, I'm not the representative from the Public Advocate's Office. That's our borough advocate, Philip Ellison, but I'm happy to speak. We talked a little bit ago about, I wasn't prepared to do this. We spoke a little bit ago when I came on, sorry I was late, about cancel rent. The Public Advocate absolutely supports that. And there's ways that it could be done. You could, as far as the mortgages, you can put it on the back end or something. We continue our work with communities in NYCHA housing. My position is Deputy Public Advocate for Housing Equity, and I do all things housing. I also do senior issues and food insecurities. One of the things that we have coming up next week on the 28th in the evening at 6 o'clock, we're doing a legal clinic, a housing legal clinic with legal services organizations that includes the Legal Aid Society, Take Root Justice, Legal Services New York, and Mobilization for Justice. And we will be giving information and even one-on-one questions from tenants, and we're going to do breakout rooms on Zoom for tenants who are NYCHA, rent regulated, Mitchell Lama, and HUD. So if you can, I'll send some information to Shatik, and you can send the information on to your contacts. It's going to be a very important conversation.
Delcenia, thank you. I know that Senator Benjamin has to hop off, so just wanted to say on behalf of Housing and Land Use and our entire board, thank you, Senator Benjamin, for joining this call.
Thank you for inviting me.
Okay, so I see we still don't have Michelle, so I'm just going to open it up. I'm not seeing
Michelle is here.
Michelle?
Yes, hello.
Okay, Michelle, thank you. We've been trying to go to you. The subject was, as reporting out, many people have talked about the importance of what's going to be happening in Congress. And can you just give us an update? I know your congressman has been very proactive on the issue of this housing crisis and tenant relief for both commercial and residential. So, any updates for us?
Yes, the bill passed the House where they're trying to work with the bill in the Senate. And there has been money for like rental arrears to support the landlords, because the whole dynamic, which everyone's been discussing, is if tenants don't pay, how do the landlords, whether they're small or large, manage their own finances and paying their mortgage and their taxes? So part of the CARES Act, and I can get those numbers to you. I have multiple meetings I'm on at the moment, sorry. Whereby landlords would get the support for back rental arrears. So that should not, but of course, this bill has passed the House. They're still trying to see if it will pass the Senate. Hello?
Yeah, I'm here. So what do you think, the time frame for that is, Michelle?
Hopefully the Senate will be reviewing it the upcoming week, right? Because it really needs to be addressed. The New York delegation has really been pushing for the Senate to respond and to respond in a bipartisan manner. So for example, and there's also more money, like almost 10 billion being put aside for more PPP, which is important for the small businesses. And I just report out that more small businesses in the district have been receiving funding. So that's a positive thing, which means they should be able to put some of those funds towards the commercial rent, which is important for landlords who have commercial tenants.
So are there any questions for Michelle?
Yes, so this money is going to the landlords and not the tenants?
Right, that was my question.
No, the money would not go directly, to the tenants if that passes, right? So it's $100 billion for emergency rental assistance, right? And this was done in co-sponsoring with Representative Chu Garcia. But the money would not go directly to tenants. What they have pushed for is another stimulus check for $1,200 per person, as what has been going out before, and up to $6,000 per family. But if you have your own rental arrears, Congress would not fund you to pay that off, right? That would go towards the landlords. And I'm sure there would be a detailed process they would have to do, so those rental arrears would be addressed.
Any questions or comments on that?
And I have some, I have some more information for the housing, sorry.
Okay, Michelle,
Yeah.
this is Donna. So I'm hearing a lot for landlords, and this meeting is sounding a lot like a landlord meeting and not a tenant meeting. And I, like Delcinia and Jamani and Senator Janaris, not that I don't want landlords to thrive, but I think the tenants are the ones that are hurting more in this issue. And they're going to be facing a lot of evictions, and these landlords are still going to be owning property because they have equity in the property that they have. The tenants don't have equity in their apartments. So basically the rent that they pay is all that they have. And if they don't have a job, they can't possibly be able to pay these rents. I know the federal government has not thought about tenants at all in this process because, of course, tenants don't make enough money or they don't carry enough bigger pockets to make a difference for the people that are making these laws. However, I think that because of the way that we are, because we are in Central Harlem, mostly renters. I mean, we do have homeowners and we have HDFCs. So I'm not saying, but HDFCs would, I'm not saying that it's not for, not to give money to landlords. However, in the first bill that went out, landlords were able to get 3 months of not paying their mortgage, but the tenants did not have that luxury. So I'm wondering what's going to happen to these tenants, even though I mean, myself being a landlord, I understand this because I have to pay my mortgage. So I get that. However, I think that our community is made up of more people that are tenants, renters, more so than homeowners.
So thank you. Go ahead.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
So I thank you for that feedback. And I think part of the tenant dynamic has to be looked at holistically, even from a political perspective. There are some powers that the courts have. There are powers that city government has, and there are powers that the governor has, right? And then you have the federal government, which looks at everything for every 50 state, right? So these negotiations, as much as the New York delegation has pushed this, and this has been on the mindset, particularly of Congressman Esbiat, how do we protect the tenants? So the mindset behind the $100 billion emergency rental assistance is so that tenants are not pushed out, because the landlords would be reimbursed for that lost rental income, right? The reason why the governor has pushed out another 60 days is to protect tenants who have been impacted, unfortunately, by COVID in one way or another. The other thing that my office has been noticing, which has been helping constituents, is that the federal government has been adding an additional $600 on top of the unemployment. People are getting that money now, and they're even getting it back retroactively. So they have been able to meet the demands of their rent and other bills. So I know it's not a perfect solution, but we are open to hearing really constructive ideas, and I can take that back up to my boss, right? And the other thing that the congressman has really pushed for is the consideration for the homeless, right? To make sure that there is close to $1 billion to support those who are currently just homeless at the moment. So those things are, really important. Like I said, it's not a perfect solution, but they have been trying to think about how we negotiate this. And the other big challenge New York has is that most other states don't live like us. Most other states don't even, NYCHA alone is a big city. So when the New York delegation is on that floor negotiating for us, they have to convince Colorado and Nebraska and Nevada and Montana to buy into what we need. So we all just have to keep up our advocacy. And I do appreciate your time and patience and understanding. And I will send the information for housing specifically to Shatik, what has been proposed.
Thank you.
Charles, can I reply?
I
Yes,
just
you
want to make
can.
one little quick point, and that is, can I make one quick point, Charles? And I think that this is a good conversation, and I hope everybody's listening, and I hope people are also thinking about how we got to where we are, and how we got to where we are is something called massive gentrification and displacement. When people are displaced, they don't always move to another place, they become homeless. And I think that we have to, as a community, think about how we're moving forward from this time on and protecting what little affordable housing we have left, and what kind of housing is built here and who can live in it. And so this whole period, right, that we're going through right now with COVID on all different fronts, housing and other things. This is an opportunity for our community and communities of color across the city and across New York and across the country, really, to sit down and have a conversation about reimagining how we move forward, how we live in our communities, who protects our communities, and who sits in the room making decisions about how our communities will look moving forward. this is not just something that's happening right now and then it's going to end later. We need to learn the lesson from what is happening here and what has been exposed. We've been living since we've been in this country under structural racism, and the structural racism is still here and it's still being perpetuated in how urban areas and how cities are being built and expanded. So I'm going to get off my soapbox, but I hope that we all can use this as a community, as a teaching moment, and do better moving forward.
Okay, Del Senior, thank you. I see, Chanel, you have your hand raised, and I appreciate the fact that you raised your hand. You need to say something more, Donna?
Charles, I just want to say I can't get on the Zoom, and a lot of people are texting me saying the same thing. They can't get on the Zoom, so we can't raise hands.
Okay, is that you? Is that Cordell?
Yes, I've been trying to get on the Zoom for like a half an hour, and other people before that, and there's people texting me saying, how can they get on? Somebody's Zooming it, doing it live on Facebook, and that's how some people are able to hear what's going on, but people can't participate.
Charles, this is Pastor Stacy. I really want to make a comment. I'm on the phone.
Hold on for 1 second.
And I just wanted to...
Wait, one second, please. Just 1 second.
We're streaming it live through Facebook, so anyone can join and see what's going on via Facebook. Cordell, I'll send you an email with the link, and then you can forward it to the people who need it.
Okay.
All right,
I have an email with the link, but it's not working.
I'm gonna send you a new link.
Yeah,
okay,
there was a technical problem, Cordell, earlier on that we thought was fixed with the actual link, but if you go and you use ID and the participant ID, which is on the agenda, that's how a lot of people were able to join. So we apologize for that. So I'm going to Chanel Washington, who has a question, has her hand raised.
I would like to speak to, Michelle just said that we have to keep our advocacy up. In order for us to keep our advocacy up, right? If we allow for elected official representatives to come and tell us, you know, well, there's a bill going through the House that's speaking to this, that, and the other, but there's no specification as to the number, the name of this bill, so that we can be able to say when we are advocating or we are going into the community that we have something specific that we can say that people need to support and need to call and bang on the phones to their representatives to support, right? That's number one. I think we need to be specific in our advocacy. So when elected official representatives come to our meetings, we should ask them to please have the numbers of the bills that are reflecting what they are saying so that we can begin to disseminate that into our communities. The other thing I would like to say is in terms of, you know, we're at a crucial point, right? It's like people are saying, okay, I'm on the renter side, or not necessarily on the renter side, but they understand renters don't have the money to pay, but we understand that not paying rent puts the landlords in a position. So is there any way, or is there any legislation at the federal level at this moment that speaks to maybe possibly visiting our federal exemptions or bills that allow for the major developers to be exempt from, you know, paying taxes? Is there any way we could revise that so that they're paying a little bit more into it, because they are the ones that have the money? It's not the small landlords. So we can't but so much we can do to them because they are one step from being the renter. So, and they're actually carrying the tax burden, because if we're gonna provide exemptions for people to come in our communities and develop, right? Because we wanna see better, you know, buildings or communities or whatever, then that means that someone has to pay the bills. And this coronavirus is going to be a heck of a bill, which is probably why they are now back to side parking, even though we're still mandated to be home. So nobody's moving their car, but we still now have to move our car because somebody has to collect money from somewhere. So is there some way that we can, I don't know what the legislative process is in the congressional office, but, you know, is there legislation? One, can you guys look and see if there's legislation already speaking to that issue? If not, then maybe you guys can work with someone or some organization in the district to come up with some legislation that says that we can't really have all these people not paying and then putting the burden on the homeowners where they are one step away from being a renter. And then now we're sitting here fighting over, should we blame the renter or the small landlord owner, when both of them are pretty much poor and in debt, because, right, most of the landowners owe mortgages. So
Okay,
we have to figure
Chanel.
out if we can do something like that. And I'm just saying, for us to be more, you know, effective in advocacy, we have to be more specific in what we are asking for, what we are looking for, so that we can disseminate and say, hey, I need you guys to call Senator such and such and say no, such and such. We don't even have that really in place to mobilize that type of advocacy. So when she says we have to keep, you know, on with our advocacy, I'm trying to figure out what advocacy is that.
Okay, I think your point has been heard. Michelle, you want to respond, but I understand what Chanel is saying, and all we're saying is that we need fact sheets. We need, you know, things that we can act on, and I agree with her that the specifics of those things broken down, especially in terms of what you reported on tonight, you know, would be helpful. I see that Karen Ori has her hand up. Shatik,
I have, so I reported, excuse me.
Hold up. Before, we'll let Michelle respond to that, and then after that, Pastor Stacey Ramos was after Donna. So we should let Michelle answer, then we'll go to Pastor Stacey, and then Karen Ori.
Okay.
Thank you, Shatik. Thank you.
So first, thank you, Chanel, for your feedback and your input. I have, on a daily basis, out of my office, I send out Congressman Espaillat's congressional information, his press releases, and his letters. So at the last meeting, when we had the Echo Dove meeting, and it was requested that I send information on the HEROES Act, because that's the act I'm speaking about this evening, I did email that to our district manager, so that our office would get it. I do not mind sending it out to people on an individual level. Okay, so that everybody has the updated legislative report. So I can do that for the office.
Thank you, Michelle. So, Stacey, you want to go ahead and make your point?
Can everyone hear me? I'm sorry.
We can. I can.
Okay, great. Again, this is Pastor Ramos. I just wanted to come on. I am constantly trying to get a word, and I'm on the phone, so I have to do my due diligence in order to raise my hand. I do respect that. I wanted to go back to what Donna was saying, and Chanel absolutely brought in a bit of information on that as well. It was mentioned that this is kind of sounding like a landlord's meeting and not a renter's meeting. And I remember from back 2 meetings ago when Josh spoke so eloquently about landlords. There's not enough being said about landlords. And so I really just wanted to thank Michelle for coming on and really talking about this act and talking about the fact that how this could be an issue, as we all know, for the landlords, but it's not really being spoken about. And Donna was saying that she's a landlord as well, and she spoke about equity. Sometimes there is negative equity that the landlords are facing. And so what was just recently said was that, you know, the landlords are just one step away from being a renter. So we've got to really push this with the HDFCs and with the affordable housing situations that's going on as well, keeping in mind reimagining and the homelessness issue and all of those issues. But quite frankly, we'll all be in a very poor situation if we don't look out for what really needs to happen. And these landlords with property taxes, no brakes on any of these things. Most of them in the area that I'm in and within the HDFCs are not receiving any kind of relief or efforts. These things still have to be paid. And what can happen very realistically is the fact that the tenants won't have anywhere to be, and the landlords won't have any property, because the negative equity is very real. So I just wanted to, again, say that the CARES Act, I didn't really get a time frame as to when the Senate may approve it, or I know they're looking into it, when it could realistically be touched on that it would be approved. But that's something that's very important, because then it can be dispersed. Then the landlords can pay whatever needs to be paid, and then we can definitely keep at the forefront the tenant matter and the tenant situation. So I just really wanted to put that in place because it's really very important, and a lot of us are experiencing that as well. So thank you for hearing me out.
Thank you, Pastor Ramos. Karen Ori, you had a question or comment?
Yes, I wanted to ask a question of the elected officials, and this is kind of along the same lines. I'm a novice. I really don't know a whole lot about the real estate industry, but I'm just wondering what specific legislation is in place to protect not-for-profits with these large affordable housing profiles, portfolios in our community from succumbing to unscrupulous landlords or landlord takeover post-COVID-19 quarantine. And this is as rents become due at the end of the quarantine period, which are accumulative, and people will struggle to try to pay and may not be able to, and could cause financial hardship for these not-for-profits.
So I think you raised that for elected officials. I do see that we have a representative from Brian Benjamin's office who joined as Brian left. We have Shauna Armengol is here with us. Shauna, you have anything to comment on that? I just want to remind everyone, we started this meeting talking about NYCHA. And certainly even Senator Benjamin indicated we have more NYCHA developments in our Central Harlem district, in his district, than we have anywhere else in the country. So I do understand, you know, I wear both of those hats. I am someone who runs an affordable housing, you know, portfolio, 100% affordable, you know, and I do know that that domino is connected. I think what we heard Stanley talk about, what we heard Donald Notice talk about, and Kenny Morrison was just trying to connect the dots between, you know, that domino, because if landlords fail, as Karen is saying, who else will come in to further prevent the displacement that's happening in our community? So, Shauna, you are from Brian Benjamin's office. Anything you want to add?
Well, I'll first talk about, and I know maybe the senator might have talked about it, I'm not sure because I came on after he left, tackling the NYCHA first. I know we had the most, the senator has the, out of all the senators, he has the most NYCHA in his district, in his Senate district, and Grant houses have actually had the most amount of deaths in our district as well as the city. And so after that is St. Nicholas houses and then Johnson houses. And so we have been being proactive, making sure they have the right amount of masks, hand sanitizers for the community, make sure they get the meals that they need. And we're just trying to make sure that we try to fight racial disparities, because we know that they may lack some means. And so we're just trying to make sure we stay on top of that. And if Ms. Karen, if you can repeat your question, and I'll see if I can tackle what you were.
Yeah, yes, I'm wondering what protections can be put in place to protect our not-for-profits who have these large affordable housing portfolios in our community from being taken over by unscrupulous landlords who will come in and continue to displace people, possibly. So that's my question. What protections can we put in place to prevent that from happening?
So there definitely can be put in some legislation, of course. And I know non-for-profits were eligible for some federal money. So I know Michelle should be able to jump in on this as well. And there have, so I do know there has been some federal money for them as well. So I don't know, Michelle, if you can kind of tackle this question too on a federal level.
Yes, so the PPP program, there is still at least $100 billion left in the pot. And so churches that are nonprofits or have a nonprofit arm are eligible to apply for the PPP program. So, and if there's any questions, we are aware that the Columbia Small Business Development Center in Harlem has been assisting with the application process, and as well as the small banks like Carver and Ponco have been really good at getting applications through, where we've had more success with that than with the larger banks. And there's even been creativity where people are getting their loans through PayPal. So if you have any additional questions or specific nonprofits who need assistance, reach out to our office because we can help them navigate that.
Raphael,
Chairman Powell?
Hello?
Yes, Chairman Powell, can I say something really quick, please?
Yes, go ahead, Chanel.
So I want to say that we have to acknowledge the basics of this all, right? That when we speak of allocating funding or allocating monies from the federal level or state level, that we're talking about allocating monies that was raised from tax paying. So we need to look at who's actually paying taxes, right? So I know someone mentioned about nonprofits, but we have to acknowledge that nonprofits are exempt. Big development corporations are carrying exemptions. The people that's coming into NYCHA and taking over and redeveloping NYCHA are carrying exemptions. These people are not, so we're not getting any money from them, but we are voting to allocate the funding to them. So we need to take a position as this committee, I'm talking to the committee members, in terms of where we are going to take a position for our community, and understanding that some of us may be developers, or some people may be landowners, some are real estate professionals, and all of that, but we have to deal with the facts of our district, and that the chairman has already stated that we're carrying a predominantly rent-to district. We have a bunch of NYCHA in our district, so we should be taking the position of the renters. And what does that look like? Are we presenting a resolution or coming up with a resolution that we're then going to pipeline through these elected officials saying, hey, we are calling for cancel rent or lower the rent or something? And people may be upset that we love and we know, but we have to really think about what we're doing in this crucial time right now. And we need to decide for this committee on housing in the middle of a historically Black district, what position are we going to take as a community board? After hearing from these elected officials and these community organizations, what are we going to do? What stance are we going to take? What does that resolution look like? Where are we sending that? And how are we going to put our advocacy in terms of making sure that somebody's tracking that resolution, that we always have somebody on the phone calling saying, please support our resolution, give us somebody that's going to help us turn that into legislation. If it's not legislation that's already there, that's speaking to this, we need to really narrow down and not just constantly have conversations around what the issues are and maybe possibly throwing out ideas. We need to begin to act. And the way we can act is that when people come to us, we have to have numbers, we have to have something to act on. So as I understand these issues we have, I'm asking all the representatives that have attended this meeting to please look through your bills or any bills coming through your pipeline that speaks to the issues that were raised on this call, and report those to the chair so that he can have us as a committee view those and we can vote on what we agree or disagree with. And that will be us beginning to take action. But if we keep just conversating and inviting people to conversate, that's not really us taking action. So I just wanted to say that really quick.
Well, I think you're right. You know, and here's what I would like, since I'm chairing housing, and of course this is a joint housing and land use, you know, committee meeting. So I know that, you know, we have Karen Dixon and others who are on. I'm not sure whether Lisa has joined us as of yet, but you're absolutely correct. I'd like to see some things come between this meeting, you know, and our executive committee meeting, you know, next week, you know, that with those who are very passionate, I've heard you, Donna, I've heard you, Chanel, and I know that there are other very, very informed and passionate people who are members of those two committees. So let's start circulating some draft resolutions of what you're asking housing and land use to deal with. We can take that to the executive committee meeting next week and get some action done, and then take it to our general board meeting the beginning of next month. So I'm in total agreement. It should not just be conversation. This requires action. So thank you, Chanel and Donna. So I await, you know, and I'm available. So if we need to schedule a call for tomorrow or Monday, let's do it.
Right. I think we should get a report from the elected officials first so we can see what's on the table, so we're not reinventing wheels and wasting time. And at that point, then we can decide if we need to create something else, and it's not a matter of us supporting what's already in the pipeline.
Well, I get that, and I'm just saying that there's enough information that's even been shared in this meeting that we might want to consider taking some, even if they're broad positions on that, you know, and that's all that you hear me recommending.
Okay, so Charles, this is Donna. What I have been working on is a forum, a housing forum, legal, with Gregory Baggett. We've been working on a forum, and it's going to be on June 16th. I'll give you more details. I'm gonna have a save the date at the general board meeting, and also at the executive council. So that's my input as far as, but again, it's going to be more on the tenant side. But you can all, it'll be a Zoom meeting, so you can all join, and we want to take it from there. So that's just
Hey,
my,
great. So I'm glad for that announcement. I see Gregory Baggett has his hand raised. So Gregory, you have a question or a statement?
I had a question, really. I have been working on this forum, and I'll circulate information to Donna that she can share with you and the executive committee moving forward. But I wanted to find out, I think I was trying to connect some of an understanding of some of the governmental resources to the concerns of tenants. And so we had a number of nonprofit sponsors who were basically talking about their own hardships. And so I was wondering if the PPP loan or the PPP grant, is it tied to operating expenses alone? In other words, do they get the money by justifying operating expenses? Do they get the money by proving that they've had a shortfall in rental income? And when they receive the money, is any of it applied to offset those people who aren't paying rent?
So I can go to some of that. I think we need to make sure that we understand when we say PPP, it is the Paycheck Protection Program. So
Yeah.
the threshold qualifying consideration, as you know, Gregory, is first demonstrating, you know, the protection of, you know, those payrolls. You know, then you can use 25% of that, but that threshold thing has to be fulfilled. So someone asked me the other day, could you just do a PPP if you were just really talking about just operating? And as you point out, essential workers, for example, even for the not-for-profits or big ones, you know, are those maintenance crews. They have been, you know, told they are essential, and they report to work, and they have to keep those buildings clean and sanitized and such. So I believe, Donald, you can weigh in, or Kenny, that there is a threshold qualifying consideration for that Paycheck Protection Program that first talks about payroll, and then there's 25% for operating.
Yes, Charles, that's correct. 75% of it can be spent on payroll, and 25% can be paid for benefits. That's part of the payroll, utilities, mortgages, and stuff like that. But it's only for It's not for a hardship. It's only for payroll. That's why it's payroll protection. So it's only keeping the employees employed.
Well, Gregory, your point is well taken, that they've even done the disaster relief fund has now shifted to strictly agricultural. So, there are not, then those initial $10,000 grants that could have been expanded beyond that into long-term loans, are now limited to just those persons engaged in the agricultural market. So there's no question that's being expressed here. We have I think we can all conclude, which is all I was saying to Donna, that based on this call, there is not enough being done. Not enough being done on the federal side. We appreciate all of what Congressman Espaillat is doing and others, but not enough being done on the state side, and certainly not enough being done by the city to address this housing crisis and the threat of displacement. And Lord have mercy, what's going to happen with mental distress for people associated with worrying about what happens after this moratorium is finished and then these evictions begin again. So good point, Gregory.
Yeah, could I say one thing about I think there's a lot of, genuine concern about the ability to pay rent. And I think to some degree, we all probably were very surprised to hear the percentages of people who actually paid rent. But I think ultimately the problem is going to be a little bit further down the road and not in this moment. But
Agreed.
What I wanted to share with those people that are concerned almost exclusively about the concerns of tenants, and that's an important issue. But when I talk to tenants, they really don't care one way or another about the rhetoric, whether it's a cancel rent or a landlord bailout. They don't care. All they care about is that whatever comes down in the form of either canceling rent or a subsidy gets applied to their rent arrears. So I wouldn't expect Congress to actually create a program that paid tenants, because there's no actual guarantee that the money would go where it's supposed to go, and that could lead to problems. So if we're going to advocate around this congressional bill, what we need to do is make sure that there are protections in terms of language that ensures that the money is applied to arrears or to assist people who are paying rent. That's where I think our focus should be, particularly with the congressional bill, and as well as with the Kavanaugh bill in the Senate.
So Raphael, did I see you have your hand raised?
Yes,
I'm
yes.
sorry.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. I'm
I have
sorry
muted
we didn't
myself here.
recognize you earlier.
Sorry. But just for the sake of clarity and accuracy, there was a comment made by Karen earlier in our conversation in regard to having slumlords come into the community and grabbing properties and displacing tenants. I just want her to know that indeed that is not happening in our community anymore. And it is, as an example, we had Donna Notice, as well as Kenneth Morrison. These are people representing nonprofit real estate organizations that really are doing a terrific job in making sure that what you said does not happen again. I know they have happened in the past, but in this particular times, and I had the experience of working with them in order to preserve affordable housing in our community, particularly in our district. So I just want to make that clear, that that is not happening in, as you put it, in our community anymore. It might happen in a larger scale, like the one we have discussed for the last few years. But in this particular case, these two people that are represented in this chat are really making an effort to maintain affordability in our district. I just want to make that clear.
Okay, thank you, Raphael. I see Cordell has finally been able to join. Donald, you had a response?
Yeah, I just want to add something to that, and you know, Kenny had touched base on it, but as a not-for-profit landlord, we are concerned about tenants not paying their rent and how we can assist them in paying their rent. And where Kenny mentioned about Section 8, and we're working with HPD right now to get Section 8 vouchers. And by July 1, they'll get some new vouchers and they'll be able to, you know, support us on that effort. There's also a one-shot deal that we go after for tenants to get subsidies from Catholic Charities and other organizations like that to do a one-shot deal. There's also the executive order that the governor put out for a security deposits, that tenants can use their security deposits in order to you know, pay the rent if they get behind. And we support that 100%. And I think the community board should be talking to HPD to see what HPD is going to do, because they're looking at taking CDBG funds to do rental assistance and sort of help out on that end, to the point that Gregory was talking about. So I think there's other, you know, the agencies itself have plans in order to try to, you know, because they don't want these buildings, low income buildings to fail, and they got a lot of, you know, investment in them. So I think there's an avenue that you'll need to look at. And Charles, maybe you might want to invite HPD up to see, you know, talk to them to see what they're going to do.
And Donald, we should just point out, and Shatik could confirm, we have invited HPD representatives even onto this call for this evening, and we'll follow up a little bit more diligently and intently with them, but they were invited, as we also invited representatives from NYCHA, who did not, you know, accept the invitation to attend. So we appreciate. I know that Karen Ori has her hand up. Karen, you have another question?
Yes, I just want to say I appreciate all of the stopgaps that have been mentioned to try to protect the not-for-profits and for affordable housing is what I'm saying. But I just want to say that these are unprecedented times and they're long-term, and you know, we need to really look down the road to see what the implications are and what the impact can be. So I'm talking about that as well.
So I just wanted to mention, I hope folks are looking at for those who can, other than those who are calling on their phone, Terry Wisdom has put in a few very, very good comments. So Terry, I just feel like, thank you for your, you know, diligence in putting things in. And she had a question, you know, a statement. Why don't you just go ahead and speak when you were talking about the mayoral task force? Terry, you know, can we?
I'm unmuted now. Thank you. Yes, I've been raising this almost every day, whatever meeting I'm on, because the mayor has formed a task force on race, and a lot of money is allotted for that task force. And the First Lady, Charlene McCray, will be heading up the task force. But we heard about it 2 weeks ago. And I haven't really been able to track any information as to what is happening with it, because if there's a task force on race, very specifically Community Board 10 and many other Harlem community members should be at the table, because there's a race issue and it's about us, and it's all over the news that what's happening with the Black and brown people. So if there's a task force, we need to be on it. And there's also a considerable amount of money that is going to be spent or is already allotted for this task force. So I think it's something that we have to demand some answers for. And these are unprecedented times. There is so much information that is coming across. It's very difficult to keep up with it, reading back and forth. And you know, Congressman Espaillat has been amazing. We have the platform Harlem Network News. He's come on twice, and he and the other representatives really explaining it. So about the HEROES Act, and you know, this is the second act that has come. So if you go to the Harlem Network News, you can look back on it and actually hear it, because it's very difficult. Some of these things you're reading it, but there's so much information. But we have to stay informed, because if we don't, we're going to be like pushed over and pushed aside. So whatever way we can read it, you can go. That's why he's speaking. Whatever there is, if you can listen and figure it out, it'll help us. But we have to stay on top of this. This is critical. It's unprecedented times, and we cannot be left out of this. This is our opportunity. So that's what Harlem Network.
I see your hand. Just wanted to get Cordell clear. She's put a request in to make a statement into the chat. Cordell, go ahead. Can you unmute Cordell Shatik?
Yep.
You can speak, Cordell.
Yes. So, and I'm sorry, I missed a lot of it trying to get on. But I just want to say that as we talk about COVID-19 and rent and people needing assistance with rent, I want to go back to something we talked about in the last board meeting. And I think I'm not sure, but I think Chanel raised this point. You know, those pay rent, it is a struggle before COVID-19. It's a struggle for a lot of people to pay rent. They are paying more than half their income already. And of course, people try to pay rent because nobody wants to be homeless, particularly right now. And even though they're assured that no evictions will happen, they're still concerned about when that order is lifted and what's going to happen at that point if you don't pay the rent. I think that as a community board, community leaders, we really have to work hard to get a handle on rent, the rate of rent as it is, without COVID or not. Rent is very high in our communities, and it does not compare to the salaries of the people in our community. You're telling people you're going to give them jobs that pay them $15 an hour. They cannot pay rent for these apartments. That does not pay rent. So we take care of the disparity that happened, that led to this disparity. And that is how we solve the problem. I think someone earlier talked about education. All of this has a role to play, and we have to untangle it, go backwards so before we can go forwards. This is the perfect time for us to start talking about some real equity and some real fairness all across the board, from salaries to businesses to Black businesses. We talk about PPPs. Not very many Black businesses got those PPPs even still. So there's a bunch of disparities that already existed, and there are more that are continuing to exist. We have to fight to go backwards. And Terry, I'm with you. I've been asking about
I think you're breaking up, Cordell.
I'm okay.
You're done?
Yes, I just said I'm with Terry on the task force.
Okay, good. So I know that it is now 8:24. You know, I believe, you know, that we should, yes, Donna, can I just finish this statement?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm just recommending that we're going to use this last 6 minutes for any final comments or questions. I see 2 hands that are raised, and Donna will go to you. And, you know, just be mindful of that fact that I'm recommending that we conclude at 8:30. So go ahead, Donna.
Okay, thank you. So the task force that everybody is asking about, it's the Mayor's Recovery Task Force, of which the task force on race and equity and racial equity and inclusion is one of them. It's several several of the council. The people from Harlem is the young lady from the Apollo Theater. Jennifer Jones Austin is on there. Greg Floyd from the Teamsters Union. So there, the young lady from the Studio Museum is on there, and there's a list, and it actually tells you what they do and what the advisory councils are. So there's for business, there's labor, there's race and equity, there's health, is mental health. There's a lot of different segments of that particular council, because it's called a council, of which the task force on race and equality is one of the members of that council. So I hope this information helps.
So Donna, I'm going to ask Shatik to post. I've seen that listing, and you know, it's more inclusive. Go ahead.
Send the link.
Charles, I just want to say
More inclusive than that.
I was on a conference call. I think it was either yesterday or the day before with Brian Benjamin and members of the mayor's office, and this issue was raised about racial equity, and Brian himself and other people that were on the call stressed this point directly to the mayor's office, and they said that they would be back in touch with us, and they want to, you know, ingratiate our opinions and see what they can do to include and hear our voices on that task force. So I'll follow up with Brian's office because I know that that issue was raised.
Okay, so we're going to then have these. I see 3 hands raised, and those are going to be our final 3, you know, questions or statements. Chanel, you have your hand raised. Gregory, you have yours, and Mina White, and those will be the. And I do see that. Thanks, you know, Chanel. I think you put the task force, you know, link onto the chat. So let's start with you. Let's see if we go to Gregory and then Mina, and then we're going to conclude this meeting.
Is there any way that we could get a list of that stuff? I put a link in the chat called Where We Live. It's something, it's like they're in partnership with HPD, and apparently they're, hold on one second. So apparently they were, hold on.
So to answer your question, I've asked Shatik, and Donna says she sent it. We're going to publish, you know, we'll put it on the CB10's, you know, website, and we'll certainly send it out to everyone who's on this call. So there is the list that we can, and we have it all broken down.
Right, they're talking about the response task force, but there's something else that's here. Where We Live NYC Fair Housing Together, Confronting Segregation and Taking Action to Advance Opportunity for All. I put the link in the chat for everyone if they want to click on it. It says Where We Live NYC is a collaborative planning process led by the City of New York to better understand how challenges like segregation and discrimination impact New Yorkers' everyday lives. Through Where We Live NYC, the City of New York is developing the next chapter of fair housing policies that fight discrimination, break down barriers to opportunity, and build more just and inclusive neighborhoods. Is there any way we could get some information, because it's just not enough on this website, as to what this is? Obviously, someone was funded, and why we aren't a part of it. You all could just look around the website to see that there's many people that's not involved in this conversation, but somehow this is happening. So
we'll follow up with that, and that is exactly the kind of thing that I'm saying that we can take to our executive committee meeting and make sure that that becomes an action item and not just a question and point of discussion. So thanks, Chanel. We'll
Charles,
go to,
this is Pastor Ramos. I work with Mark Matthews down at HPD, and I could try to find some information out about that now if you guys would like.
Thank you. Please, and you know, we'll definitely look forward to your sharing that. 2 last questions, Gregory. Shatik, can you unmute Gregory?
He's not paying attention.
In addition to this housing forum I've been working on, I've been also trying to figure out a way to bring HPD to the district. And quite frankly, it's a much heavier lift than I can do alone. So I wanted to suggest, I actually sent a letter to Brian Benjamin asking him to take the lead on a project like that. And I wanted to ask you if you could follow up with Brian and work with him on bringing HPD and the senior team to the district. The reason.
Absolutely. I just actually sent a note to Donald Notice as to the follow up with that. I'm going to follow up with Shauna, who's on this call from Brian Benjamin's office, and with the senator himself. I think that is the exact point that I heard mentioned earlier. So
Well,
the answer is yes.
Keep in mind, I'm HPD can be any number of characters, but I think having Louise come, the commissioner, and her senior team, and if they could actually get all of the different elements of housing in the same room, that is developers, landlords, tenants, there might be an opportunity for us to understand all of our different needs. And they've been doing these forums in other districts. So it's something that Louise is doing quite often. And I think it would be a lost opportunity if we didn't take advantage of this thing she's doing.
No, we'll reach out to Louise Carroll, the commissioner, and that will definitely be one of our follow-ups on this. So we have one last hand raised, Mina White.
Hi. So I just wanted to just speak to the point of just bills being raised, at least on the state side. Unfortunately, I mean, we do know that kind of this waiting game is due to the fact that we're in the double digits in terms of a budget deficit here in the state. So we're really looking for support from the federal government, and hoping in what this package went through the House with, and that this can pass to the Senate so it can positively impact us here in New York. But one bill that I do want to make sure is on you all's radar as a committee is the Emergency Coronavirus Affordable Housing Preservation Act that the Assembly member is signed on to, and it was presented by Assembly Member Lenthal and State Senator Salazar, and the bill number is S8190A, and the Assembly bill number is A10318. And basically, this is covering a lot of the issues that.
Mina, can you just repeat that one more time? I'm sorry.
And Nina, can you just put that into the chat?
Right. Because I was going to try to put that for her. Okay.
So I'll put in the chat, and then so it covers a lot of what we discussed when we're talking about affordable housing developers, and when we're talking about tenants as well as HDFC residents and shareholders. So this bill covers those folks that are often forgotten about. And what this bill also discusses is just building owners and tenants. Tenants have to, of course, provide documents saying that they have been infected, their income has been impacted due to the coronavirus, and then landlords would then have to present that documentation, show that they have lost a 10% or more, a decrease in their income, and basically the state would then fund them. And of course, this funding is going to be looked at, is a hope that we would get that through the federal government.
Okay, thanks. We look forward to that. That's absolutely something that we're going to follow up in our executive, committee meeting, next week. And that goes to Chanel's point. We're going to ask all of our representatives, Shauna, Nina, Michelle. I heard what you were saying about Echo Dev, but please just make sure that our district office gets that information and is then able to share it to the entire board. What you just reported on, Mina, is so important.
Just one second, Cal. Cal, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Just to reference what Gregory said a few minutes ago in regard to bringing HPD in our district, not to undermine the senator's importance, but I think it would be more appropriate to have via our office, considering that we are the local representative as the Councilmember Bill Perkins. So we could have a conversation about that moving forward, but I think it would be probably more appropriate to do it through the councilman office. With addition, to partner with the senators as well. I get
your point, Raphael. We'll definitely reach out to you and, and talk about that. Sorry for the noise in the background. One comment, and it's hopefully a brief one, Cordell, from you before we adjourn.
Yeah, it's a question that I'm putting to you, Charles. Can we get a representative from the mayor's office who can speak about this task force and the fact that from what was read, I don't think our perspective was represented. And also the community wants to be a part of that conversation. So I'm asking the board, perhaps you can get someone from the mayor's office to come to speak specifically about the task force on equity and specifically about equity in housing.
Cordell, the answer would be yes, we should certainly make that effort. I'll speak to our chair, Cicely Harris. I know that connections are, routinely made with, the chamber and Stacy Lynch and a few of the other people that are more senior and more directly involved with, functioning as advisors directly to the mayor and even, getting the deputy mayor for economic development, into our conversations over and above even HPD. So I think that's, our last comment. Thanks for putting the information in, Nina, about the Affordable Housing Preservation Act of 2020. I just wanted to, to say, I think, we're all weary from the number of calls and other things that we've been on, and everyone's working very diligently. So I thought this would be an appropriate time for us to have a motion to adjourn for someone and to adjourn this very excellent meeting.
Motion to adjourn.
Okay, so that was really a formality because we could just end it. So thank you so much for all of you who have been on this call. Raphael, you're saying something?
No, I'm just saying something to Donna. Notice.
Oh, okay.
Give me a call.
So listen, we have a lot of work to do. We're going to make sure we take the minutes of this, of this call and really extract from it some of the things that represent action items. We will depend on our elected officials, as Chanel said, to give us the data, the information on things that this committee and this board should be acting on. And I just want to thank all the board members and all the committee members and all of our guests, who have been on this call for the entire time. And I wish you all a good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank you.
Good night, guys.